For a number of years, I worked with the Unitarian Universalist denominations, and we would call this time of the service a time for all ages. And so, in that spirit, I'm going to need 2 volunteers to help me out with our children's sermon today. 2 brave, but I will not ask much of you souls. All right, we got 1 in the back, 1 more. Come on up. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So as they're coming up, I'll give you all instructions, and I'll come back to you in a second. So your job together is to come up with 3 different ways to tell me no. Okay? So you all work on that while I work with them a second. Okay. So today I'm going to be talking a lot about persistence. Both our Old Testament reading and our gospel talks about persistence and asking and advocating and coming back for prayer. So we're going to demonstrate some of that once they come up with their ways to tell me no. But I'm curious if any of you have examples of something you had to be persistent about before an ask was answered or you were able to achieve something. What's something where you demonstrated persistence? Yeah, tell me.
I have practice in order to perform.
Here we go. Let's see if this is on.
Practice in order to perform whether I like it or not.
All right, practicing before you. I'm just going to repeat it back. Practicing before you can perform, whether you like it or not. Yes, absolutely. What are 1 or 2 more examples of having to be persistent? Yes.
You have activity levels that have needs safety equipment to wear.
Uh-huh.
Where you can do it. And our newest one is a pump track.
Okay. Having to use the
10, 12, and 13-year-olds don't want helmets.
having to be persistent about the safety in order to do the different activities, like insisting on helmets and harnesses and everything else to make them safe for the well-being of the people who are doing it. Good. All right. So it looks like they're ready. Let me get one more example of being persistent. Yes. Marriage. Full sentence. Awesome. All right. Excellent. Okay. So here's why I wanted three ways. I'm bestowing upon you my daughter's favorite snack. It's right here. I'm going to come and ask, because I'm actually feeling a little peckish. It's been a while since breakfast. I'm going to come ask you for something to eat. But you need to practice those 3 ways of telling me no. And I will come and ask you 4 times, if you're kind of getting where we're going with this, 4 times for something to eat. But first, we're going to see 3 different ways I'm going to be denied. Tell me your names, though, first.
Harold.
Harold and?
Georgia.
And Georgia. Harold and Georgia. Harold, Georgia, my stomach is grumbling. I'm really hungry. Do you have a snack that I can have?
I'm afraid I can't help you with that today.
Oh, man. My stomach, was that number 1? Okay, awesome.
Right.
I'm so hungry, but my friend Emily is coming over to have a snack with me later. Harold, do you have anything that I can eat?
Not a chance.
Sorry, Emily. I'll keep trying. All right. I heard that Emily is bringing Philip. I really need something to share as a snack. Can you help me out?
Not even going to use words.
I have been rejected 3 times. I've asked and I have asked and I've asked on behalf of myself, on behalf of my neighbors and friends who are coming over, and yet that need is there. So I'm going to try one more time. Please, do you have anything that I can bring as a snack when my friends come over?
I believe so.
Can I have it?
You've been persistent enough.
Thank you so much. Can you give Harold and Georgia a hand, please? Thank you both. I appreciate it. You see, and we'll hear more about this in my full sermon. Part of what faith is it is active and it is persistent, and it calls us to be persistent with the hope that when we are persistent, especially on behalf of the needs of others, our asks will eventually be met. And we put our faith in our ability to advocate and ask and ask and ask for the well-being of the flourishing of all. Grace and peace to you all, beloveds. I'm going to start us today back on the farm where I worked. I worked on an organic vegetable farm for a few years. I may have shared some stories with some of you about it at some points. I remember when it was tomato season, so kind of getting into this time of year when I was taking tours around the farm. And we were walking past rows and rows and rows of the beautiful tomato plants. And we got to the edge of an acre of tomatoes, and the last couple of rows frankly looked like the tomatoes at my house. Spotty leaves, tomatoes with holes in them, vines going brown unusually early. When I finished the tour, I asked one of the farmers why this was the case. Their explanation surprised me a little. See, when they planted crops, the view wasn't simply about what that particular crop needed to flourish or how much they could pull out of the field. They considered the entire ecosystem. The entire field would need to continue to flourish in the long run. With a commitment to not use herbicides or pesticides, they thought about what had been planted in that spot before and what would come next, and how that affected the soil, the nutrients in the soil. So when they planted a crop that was likely to be infested, such as tomatoes, which are very, very susceptible to pests, they would plant a complementary plants to help attract the pollinators that would send those pests away. They thought about what else lived in the ecosystem: bugs, birds, other plants, recognizing that sometimes the best way to help the whole ecosystem flourish was to plant what they called buffer plants, an extra row or two that would provide for some of these other elements without taking over the whole crop. They also knew that flourishing didn't mean juicy, ripe tomatoes all year long, even though many of us are used to that from the grocery store. It meant that at some point they would cut off the water to the tomatoes altogether. The vines and leaves would turn brown and wither, and the last efforts of the plants would go toward the remaining tomatoes, making them the sweetest of the year. And eventually, the plant would die. And not to get too much into the science of gardening, but tomatoes are heavy feeders. They take a lot of nutrients out of the soil. And the farmers knew that even in our long growing seasons here in San Diego, when they would have time to plant another group of tomatoes in that very spot, the flourishing of the entire field and ecosystem meant whatever happened next would have to replenish the soil. Cue the chickens that would be rotated to the field to eat up the goodness of the end of the crop and leave the gift of their natural fertilizer. Cue a planting of beans after the tomatoes to add back nitrogen that had been taken out. So beyond the technicalities of sustainable farming practices, what I learned from the tomatoes and the farmer that day was that the flourishing of all is interconnected, interdependent, and it looks different at different seasons. Every plant they planted had a place in the system. Every worm, ladybug, chicken, bird had a place. To flourish meant that all had what they needed, even when that means giving up some tomatoes. I was reminded that my flourishing could not be based on taking and making sure that I have everything I need regardless of what happens to others. In our very individualistic culture where the dominant narrative is if you work hard, you will succeed, it becomes easy to think that flourishing is I have everything I need personally. If I have some stability, which is hard to come by these days, a house, an income, food on my table, then all must be well. But being able to flourish means that we are interconnected to one another. The tomatoes couldn't add nitrogen to the soil, the marigolds couldn't provide fruit, but interconnected, they could help each other and create a flourishing system for all. My flourishing is linked to yours and to my neighbors near and far. We are free to pursue flourishing, which happens in interdependence and interconnection because of God's grace and a little bit of permission to be persistent. We live in a changing world where the word unprecedented is used so often it is verging on becoming the norm and meaningless. Unprecedented heat waves, unprecedented fires, unprecedented changes in our social systems and our laws and our politics and the cost of groceries and unprecedented levels of disparity and use of force against our neighbors. Our world and lives can be so harried and fast and so unpredictable in the midst of all of that flourishing becomes hard to even imagine sometimes. There's a poet that I like named Morgan Harper Nichols, and in one of her poems called Where Grace is Blooming, she writes, "Perhaps in slowing down, I will learn to peel back the layers and find that even here, in the wild of my worry, my heart is still beating. Peace will still find me here. Joy will still find me here." Peace, joy, even possibility in the midst of this uncertainty lies an incredible opportunity for us to reimagine our world, our churches, our lives. But to do this, I firmly believe that we have in our faith two tools that are essential to doing that reimagining. The first you've already heard from me is persistence. Persistence in working together and demanding and advocating and asking and asking and asking for that which will create beloved community. John Lewis talked about living in beloved community in very eschatological terms, the bringing the heaven and the future into the now sort of terms, by describing our task as living as though it had already come into being, putting love in action, he claimed. He claimed it and he lived it. Putting love into action was having faith that it was already true and then acting so that it became real. Having faith that God's love in its fullness means all can flourish and beloved community can be actualized. And trusting in God's grace that each of us has a part to play in that realization, not because our works or acts will earn us God's love, but because we're freed in that love to lean into it. And to do what we learn how, and to do that, we learn how to ask and even demand what is right and good. And if it's not forthcoming, we persist. This is a core theme throughout our text today. Persistence on behalf of our neighbors. Persistence even to the point of arguing with God. Our Genesis reading for today is often used as one of the clobber passages. And so I'm going to say a quick aside. I'm not talking about that today, but a quick aside. Pastor Rick, you always bring me here when these are the passages to preach on. Love you dearly, but oh my word. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about how it is used. When I say clobber passages, there are a set of Bible passages, often taken out of context, that are used violently against LGBTQ+, queer, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and intersex communities, as saying the Bible is against them. God doesn't love them. They are sinful. This is one of the key ones, right? Because in our Genesis passage today, we talk about the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Sodom is used as an example and has been colloquially for years, to the point where we have sodomy laws that are still on the books in over 10 states that make same-sex relationships and sexual interactions illegal. And it wasn't until 2003 when the Supreme Court said that those were illegal in Lawrence versus Texas. But because we still have these what's called zombie laws in over 10 states, should the Supreme Court, which is very possible, overturn Lawrence v. Texas, 10 states would have same-sex relationships be illegal. And so when we talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, it often brings up, that's what we think about. And the reason that's the case is because this text often talks about the people of Sodom and Gomorrah as being evil and sinful, and we're going to destroy them. It's a very, very powerful text, but a very problematic and a very layered one, so I'm happy to talk more with you about it. And the way it has been used has been based on this idea of the sin of these places with sexual perversion. Though it was also not identified in those, and we can talk about this later too, of how offering your daughter up to be sexually violated by a mob of strangers was not the sin. But, so we can talk all about that. That's not where I want to go in this sermon, but I felt the need that we need to name that when we talk about this passage. Because what biblical scholars of the last few decades have started to relook at this passage and offer is that the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was not sexual perversion. That the sin was actually about a lack of hospitality and violence towards the neighbor. But that was the sin. And that any sort of sexual acts were used as a form of violence against them, and that was the sin. And so hospitality, not offering safe harbors for travelers and migrants, or in this case, an angel unbeknownst to them. And that's what I want to focus on for today, particularly thinking about Abraham's interaction with God. Abraham took on the difficult role of advocating for his neighbor. Abraham was persistent in asking over and over and over, going back to the Lord themselves, advocating. For the sake of 40, will you preserve this city? For the sake of 30, for the sake of 20, for the sake of 10. And each time God responding, for the sake of that many, I will not destroy it. If any of you have worked with or had small children, that sort of negotiation may feel very familiar. And we see the same type of persistence when we turn to the gospel for today. In this parable, Jesus tells us the story of a man who seeks out bread for a friend in order to serve a guest. I tell you, even though he will not get up and give anything out of friendship, at least because of his persistence, he will get up and give him what he needs. Even if I get all thumbs down, if I keep asking on behalf of my neighbor, on behalf of all flourishing, I will get the pea crisps or whatever it is that we need. Through persistence and the needs of the friend, by extension, the guests are met. And Jesus concludes this teaching with an invitation. Ask, and it will be given to you. Search, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened for you. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who searches finds, and for everyone who knocks, the door is opened. Now, far from a magic genie promise by which praying to God you can get anything you want granted to you, this invitation brings us back to a reminder that faith is active, love in action. We ask, we advocate, and we keep working toward beloved community together, even when we have to do so over and over and over again, even when that act of faith is exhausting. Being persistent all of the time is exhausting. We flourish when we realize that and realize that we are not everything and everything is not ours to do. There is a piece of Jewish wisdom, a teaching that I like very much. It comes from Jewish wisdom and ethics from a source called Pirkei Avot. And here the rabbis wrote, "You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it." You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. Fortunately, we lean on each other, and we know that we do the hard work of building beloved community, living faith as active and love as active, and we do that through the second power tool of our faith, because we know that we do not win salvation by doing the acts, but because grace frees us to do it. At the heart of Lutheran concept of grace is the notion that we are never beyond God's love. There's nothing we can or need to do to earn it, and therefore there's nothing we can do to lose it. Simply as creatures created in Imago Dei, the image of God or the divine, we can show up every day knowing we are loved, and we are free to respond to others, knowing the same is true for each and every one of them. Even as we mess up over and over and over again, we are held and loved back into right relationships with ourselves and others. And even as we ask over and over and over again for that which our neighbor needs to flourish, we are held in the hope that grace and God's love gives us, that beloved community flourishing for all is coming, is possible, and we act as though it is here already. We are free in God's grace to love persistently, to ask, to demand, and to work for the flourishing of all. Amen. May it be so.